Good morning. Happy Monday. Welcome to my channel. I'm here to build some cool stuff for Alexa. We're gonna work on a data collector, but some of you might be noticing the ridiculous apparatus on my face. I work out of my house. I don't actually need this. I just thought it'd be a good visual. But I was supposed to be in Seattle this week, and so because of the coronavirus and some of the stuff that's going around, especially in the state of Washington, my flights, well, Amazon reached out and said that all non-essential travel shouldn't happen, and so I find myself still in Ohio, no travel. Canceled my flights, canceled my hotel, and so I am here this week instead of in Seattle with my team. But that's okay. I'm gonna take this off because it's surprisingly hard to talk with that on. But I've had this mask for a few weeks. I went to India, a little less than a month ago, and I took this with me there because it was recommended even then with the coronavirus if you're traveling internationally, especially that close to China, that I should have a mask. And so there's my mask. Anyway, not going to wear it for this. Everything's fine here. Um, yeah, everybody needs to shave their beard. Ice cream for sure. But the point of today is not to focus on the fact that I'm not in Seattle or focus on the fact that the coronavirus is obviously big news, but what I'd like to do instead is build some Alexa stuff. So that's what we're here to do today. So I'm gonna jump over to actually this is the first exciting news. Look what I got working. Alexa, Alexa, right? It's working. I don't know why my camera was struggling for so long, but we are now back in business. I have my device on screen, so we'll be able to use this as we go through stuff. So that's all super exciting. But so I have Alexa on the screen. I'm going to stop saying her name, and we'll come back to this view just for a moment. So if you'll recall, last week we published the Star Wars databank, and you can use that by asking your device for the unofficial Star Wars databank. You can also find it in the skills store if you want to check that out and play with it. I've spent zero time adding any more data to it, primarily because it was my daughter's 16th birthday this weekend, and so we had family in town and had a lot of cool stuff going on, but it required me to not be sitting around a computer. So we'll get to that eventually. I also have a brand new laptop that I was planning on getting set up while I was in Seattle this week. I just realized that means I won't get that done this week. But we'll get to that eventually too. But hopefully at some point I'm going to switch over to this new laptop that I've had since November. But I've had a bunch of issues with IT trying to get it all set up and running. So we'll get there too. But the thing that I wanted to do today, as usual, is to write some code. So let's come over here and we'll get right into it. So Ice Cream, I don't recommend shaving your beard. I should suggest not traveling because you've got a good beard and there's no reason to destroy that just on the account of maybe getting a mask on your face. All right, so if you'll recall what we built last week, we built what we called a data intent. I haven't looked at this since Wednesday, so I'm refreshing myself as well. We built a data intent, and this is where we could provide a quantity, a unit, and a data type. So this might say something like my weight is 187 pounds, where weight is the data type and quantity is 187 and units is pounds. Good morning, Lord of Sound. Thank you for joining us. Good to have you here this morning. You missed out on the fun mask reveal if you didn't see that earlier. But I was wearing a very serious looking medical mask for traveling. But yeah, I'm with you. My weight has also achieved, I don't think I can put on any more weight without growing taller. I need to drop some of these LBs. But maybe this will be a good way to do that by tracking this stuff. So you can see we have a couple sample utterances. They can say quantity. They can say quantity with units. They can say data type with quantity and units. But that's basically the intent we spent the most of the time on. Coronaburg. That's funny. Let's not name diseases after me. Thank you. Sorry, I got totally distracted by that. Okay, so then we also have a data type intent. This is where I want to say a new type of data that I want to track. So I might say I want to track my weight. Let's add my as an utterance in here, just since we're in here. Track my data type query. We also discovered something I didn't realize, um, that we couldn't have two slots with the same name, even if they were used by this, because they had different data types. That was something that I didn't expect. I fully expected when we were doing this last week that I would have a data type slot here, and it would be of type data type. And then down here I could have a data type slot, and I could have a totally different data type. It turns out that it doesn't like that. And so I wasn't able to do that. So I had to call this one data type query, which is totally fine. But I'll just have to remember that it's called data type query. So then I have my data types down here. I just have weight, but remember we're going to do this with dynamic entities, so we'll be able to populate this with what the user has. And then we also have some units in here like calories, ounces, pounds, kilograms. So we'll probably need to add more to that list eventually, but for now I think it's probably pretty good. If you were a child, maybe you'd want to add something like inches or centimeters so that you could keep track of your height. But these are all units that we can add later as we're going through this. But what I'd like to do right now is be able to have the user be able to indicate their data type, and then also be able to submit data to the data intent and save it for that user. So this is going to require us to spend a little bit of time on data actually first. So let's look at that first. So I have my Airtable here. We created some tables last week for speech and error and data, but we didn't actually put anything in here. And so the first table that I'm going to create is user. And this is something I do regularly. I mess with the schema here on Airtable. We might do some dynamic slots. We'll see how far we can get in 2 hours, Lord of Sound. Let's see. So I'm going to do record ID, if I could actually type. ECORD ID. Perfect. And it's not going to a single line. What we're going to do is actually have a formula, because there already is a record ID for every record as it's created, so I can just choose to select that. And then automatically it has 3 records for me in here, and those are the unique IDs for those 4 records, 3 records. Another one that I like to add out here at the end is date created. It's always interesting to see. And this one again is another formula. And this one is going to be, I think it's time, created time. Yeah. I don't like that they named it time when it's actually a date and time, but it's fine, works. So you can see when those records were created, and if I create a new one just by clicking here, you can see that we get a new time. So this is when we created those this is when we created that table initially, and this is right now. And it's using the times. I think this is UTC, so it's probably 3:07 in the afternoon UTC. That's the times that we're using for everything, because then we can do conversions and all sorts of stuff off of that. Okay, so the stuff that we need in here for user is we're going to need the user ID. So this will be user ID. And I want to make sure that I'm naming this properly. So it's a single line of text. It's just a string value, honestly. But we'll go ahead and save that. And then I actually want to look in the schema. So we'll go to CloudWatch. See if we can do... Man, this would be awesome if I could just do this. Data collector. Let's see if that actually works. Wow. Okay, awesome. So in here, I can open up my log groups, and we'll look at a request envelope. That was something else I wanted to find, is why the word info is there all the time. But I wanted user ID. I wanted to make sure that was actually the name of it. And so we'll be capturing values like this actual user ID. I don't know how far I want to take the rest of this stuff, because I could track things like device IDs by user and a bunch of other stuff in here. I don't think that I'm going to do that. But it is pretty easy to do, and we could save information like what kind of devices they have, how many devices have screens. A lot of this is handled by the analytics in the dev portal anyway, but sometimes it's nice to be able to just store all this stuff for yourself. So, okay, so I have the thing that I needed, which was the user ID. That's the thing that I really care about. And then we could do sessions so that we could really track users and see how many sessions they have. This all feels like I really need a reason to do that, and I don't have a reason yet. So I think I'm going to wait. I think we'll just create a user record when they have a user ID, because for everything else, every other interaction, every time they try to save data, I'll have timestamps on all of that stuff. So I probably don't need to know every time they came to my skill, at least not yet, and that's always something I could add later. So for now, I'll just have my user ID. So that's the first thing that we wanted to do, was create a table called user. We store some user IDs, and I can get rid of all these records because these are all just fake. So we'll delete those. That way we can see what's actually in there. Another thing that we're going to want is user data, and this might get a little complicated, but we'll see what we can do here. Data, and so this again is going to be record ID. I like to be pretty consistent in this stuff because I need a unique identifier. That's what this first column is meant to be, and so their unique identifier works very well for me. And a lot of my lookups and stuff can be done based on that. So user data, let's think about this. Again, I'm doing all of this on the fly, so don't think for a moment that any of this is planned. We're figuring this out as we go. So we have data types, we have units, and we have quantity. Quantity is really going to be my data. But I will need a user unit. Now, do I need a user units or just a units? I probably just need a units table. But the data type is the one that's going to be interesting by user. So let's think about that. So we're going to change this to user data type. And this is going to have to then be linked to a record for a user. So we will customize this field type, and we're going to choose link to another record. We're going to link to our user table. This can't link to multiple records, and that's fine. So now this is going to be user. And what's cool about this is that I'm actually linking the records together. So I have my user table. This will be what user the thing is for. And then I'm going to have this will be data type. And this will just be maybe, this is just going to be a string that we save. And then we'll do my date created, just so it's there. The data is always there, but it's nice to be able to see it when you're looking through. Oh. Well, that's interesting. This is new. I didn't even know this existed. All right, and yeah, that's okay. That's weird that they added that as a separate thing rather than the formula that I've been using, but it looks to be the same thing. Just gives me more control. All right, so that's there. So I have my user and my data type. So I think, Lord of Sound, I think we're just going to drive towards the thing you specifically asked, which was about dynamic slot values. So I think we'll probably do that. What is the best way to work all this? So I have to have the user have a user ID, but that'll happen when they open the skill. And then I can ask them, well, they'll tell me what kind of data type they want. And if it's something that's already there, great. And if it's not, then I can add it, and then I'll have those records, and then I can automatically update their data slot, or data type slot. So I have user and I have user data type. We'll also need a table that is like user data. I have a phone call. I'm expecting some phone calls today, so I'm going to take this just in case. Hello?
This is not a solicitation
Oh,
call.
that was most certainly a solicitation call. Anytime you have to start your phone call with "this is not a solicitation" or "this is not a sales call," it's probably a sales call. So I apologize for taking a phone call on the air here, but I'm expecting some phone calls from numbers I don't recognize, so I need to make sure I can take those. Let's see. This one's going to be record ID again. I can't type today. And this is going to be formula. Do they have that in here too? No, they don't have record ID. They don't have the date thing in here either. Formula. This is going to be record ID, which is great. And then for my data, I'm going to need a user table, right? Link to another record. I want the user table. I don't want to link to multiple users. And I have my user table. I'm also going to need what data type it is. So we're going to do another one of those. And this will be user data type.
can't have multiple records. Say, this is one of the weird things about Airtable is that they offer the ability to link to multiple records, which makes sense for some things. But it doesn't matter whether or not you check that box. It always provides the results back as an array. So I don't actually know why it matters that I make that choice. This is going to be data type. And then finally, we're going to have, I don't know, what did we call it in my code? Quantity. Quantity seems like the wrong value now, but to be similar, quantity will be the thing, and this is going to be a number. Now we're going to let it be precision to 2 decimals. I don't think I want to go any bigger than that. Lord of Sound, if my social security number just won $1 million, they'll call back. I hope. Okay, so I have a quantity field that is number. That's great. So now I have user and data type and quantity, and I'll insert those things as I have them. So, do I have enough to build on now? Because we're going to have to build a few things here. I think so. Okay. So now we're going to go to our index, and we're going to go to where we actually have some code happening, the data intent. This is where I'm getting those 3 values. These are the things that they've spoken. But I have to do a couple of things first. So one of them is in my request log. This is where my skill is open. This code runs before we actually hit my intents or do anything like that. This is where I write that request envelope. And actually, I need to find, where am I writing info? I don't understand. I don't understand why the word info is getting written to my logs, but my guess is maybe that's something that Lambda's doing for me automatically. I don't know. All right, I'm not going to worry about it for now. So we have my data intent handler, and we have these values. The thing that I needed to do, though, was insert the user. So this is where we're going to use the Airtable API. So if we come over here, this is super easy to do. api.airtable.com, and in here somewhere I have my data table. So when you log into their API, it's all customized around your tables and structures and everything. And so I have this user table, and I want to create a record. And if I choose JavaScript here, oh, I need to have a record in there. Okay, I forgot they do that. So let's put a record in here. Steve. I don't need an attachments field, I don't think. So you can see that it adds these supplemental lookup tables for the other tables that I've added to it. So you should expect in user data type that there's also a user data table. This shows me the reverse relationship, which is kind of nice that's done automatically. So I need to be able to insert a record in here. Now if we come back and look at this, you can see that it gives me exactly the code that I need to be able to insert this record into my database. So the first thing that I want to do in my code is at the very top, I want to, and I'm going to open another file that I have because I've kind of massaged this code a little bit for myself. So let me open up like this one. This is the Star Wars databank code. And in here I have nothing about users, but I do have places where I do create. So the first thing that I do at the very top is I require Airtable. So let's grab that and drop that into our Lambda. This is just me requiring the Airtable npm package, which means that in here I also need to do that. So we'll do Airtable : and I don't know the version number, so let's go look at npm and see what the most recent version number is. It's 0.8.1. Okay, so I'm going to come into my code, and we're going to say at least, where is it? 0.8.1. Okay, So that will include that in my package JSON. And then when we build up my code, the Airtable npm thing. I don't use I18, and that's a really good question, Lord of Sound. I mean, I can use it, but I don't. But this was built into the template, so let's do this because it'll force me to change my code, so I can get rid of this too. And I can get rid of this. And now let's see if I've broken anything. Because I think I got... No, I didn't get rid of all of them. So we'll just map that together like that. That one's good. Yeah, that's something I'm really going to need to do, Ice Cream, is the idea that I use the same stuff over and over and over. It would be a really good idea for me to be able to... Why is this broken? Oh, because I don't need the parentheses. Okay. Let's see if we have any more .t's. Looks like there's one more. Localization request interceptor. I'm just going to get rid of this entirely. Yeah, I really need to build myself a template that just is the thing that I start with. Local is... Okay. I don't know what that was. It's gone now. So I don't know if our code's going to work, so we'll find out here in a minute. But now I can go ahead in here and add my user stuff. So I mentioned over here in the API that they have this nice code, but this is basically exactly what I'm copying. I've just formatted it so that it fits on one line and all that. So I will need this. This is the actual table ID. So let me come in here and we'll just drop this for a moment. And then I'm going to go to the Star Wars one. Good morning, LJ. Thank you for joining. It's always good to have some regulars here every time. So the thing that I wanted was, let's find that create statement again. Yeah, these two. So these are, whoa. Let's find that again. These two lines, stop it. I'm not using my keys appropriately. These two lines. We can take them over here and drop them. And then I'll talk through what this is, and I'll need this. Copy. Okay. So this is my Airtable key, which I have as an environment variable in my Lambda function, or at least I should. I don't think that I actually do. And then I actually store the IDs of my tables there as well. No, Lord of Sound, they're not necessarily templates. They're just kind of like the starter code base that I use when I build something. There's the templates that you get when you say, like, hey, I want to use the Hello World one or the fact skill or whatever. But oftentimes I have to go through and I have to rip some things out, like the internationalization stuff. And then there's other stuff that I really want to have in there, like my calls to Airtable and stuff like that I know I'm going to use. So it would be nice to just have a starter document that I use over and over and over. And it sounds like Ice Cream's ahead of me in that regard because I haven't done that. It's not, there's nothing wrong with not doing that. It just, with as much as I'm building new skills and spending all this time, sometimes it feels like I should probably take care of that. So in here, this is where we say what table we want to create. This is going to be our user table. And in here, we're going to create our record. And so let's take a look at our schema just to make sure we have this right. We have a user ID. We don't have to specify the record ID. That'll be created automatically. The date created will be created automatically. And I don't need to worry about these two. So I just really need to specify a user ID. That's pretty easy to do. So this will be user ID. And then this value is going to be handler input dot request envelope dot, and let's go back to the logs just to make sure that I've got this right. handler input dot request envelope dot session. Well, do we want context one? Let's use context. Dot context dot capital system context dot capital system, because why not capitalize that? Context dot system dot user id. That is the value that I want. User id. And so that'll be the ID that gets created in the table when we call the skill, and then this is all just the error handling stuff, which will never have errors, right? So that is all good. I can get rid of this. I don't think that I have my Airtable in there yet, so we're going to go to camera view like that, and you can stare at my face while I go into my Lambda and actually add this value because I don't want you to see it. So AWS, and we're going to go into my Lambda function. Actually, I can show you where this is, and then we'll do the actual value. So in here, Lambda. Here we have data collector, and this is the point when I have to turn the camera off because I don't even have any environment variables. So we'll do that. We will manage environment variables, add one, and in here this is where I'm going to say Airtable key. Is that what I called it? Make sure I have that right. Airtable underscore key. Perfect. So in here I have Airtable key, and then I need this value. Now is when we go away, and I go get that value, which is in the API docs, show API key, choose that, turn it off. So we don't show the API key, go to my Lambda, add that value, save. And now I have an Airtable key. Cool. So now I can come back here. We have all of that set up. All I did was add a string to that environment variable and saved it, so there was nothing complex about that, but it allows me to save that value with my Lambda and not in my code, which is better. So now I can come in and I can delete this record because I don't need this, and we can come down to my code, and now I can just refer to it as Airtable key everywhere, and we have handler input, user ID, all that stuff. So we're going to insert this record. But we're only going to do this. We don't want to do this every time, right? We also want to make sure that we don't already have a user. And so I've done this in other projects. So let me see if I can find TKO Trivia. It's neither of those. So let's just go actually open this, because I've done this logic before, and what I'm going to do is call their API and try and pull records back, and if they don't have any records, then I insert, because I want to make sure that I'm not overdoing this. So if I come into here, and I'm only going into previous code, as I'm sure many of you would, because I don't want to duplicate my efforts. Code, you know what, this code mesh one might also have it. Let's see if I did it there, because I had to do user management for this. So in here, if I do my request log, yeah, see, I'm calling get user record. That's probably the right way to do this anyway. So let's find my get user record function and see what I'm doing in there. It should be very similar to what we just did. So I am calling out and checking to see if that user ID already exists. If there isn't one, then create one, and in either case return it. So let's just take this whole function. This will be a lot easier. I'll explain it because I hate when people just copy and paste code and don't explain like what it does, but this will save us some effort. So I have this get user record function where I pass in the user ID. So let's get rid of maybe take that. That is going to be my going to be this part, this base. Okay. So in here, we're now just going to get rid of these two lines. And instead, we're going to do what we did in this code mesh scavenger hunt, which is to grab user record, like so. And then the value that comes back will be my user record. I don't need to store that in my session, so I don't even need to retrieve it, right? Because I'm going to use it every time. So the only thing I need to do is make sure that I'm creating the record. So that this is a great line to use. We'll take the console log too, just because reasons. And we'll put this here. So this calls a asynchronous function called getUserRecord, which we're going to work on in a second, and it just passes in the user ID. Now I use the session one there versus the one that's in system in the context, but I think it's fine. It's the same value either way, and I don't honestly feel like changing it that much, but it'll be the same value, so we're okay there. So now we have this user record that's being console logged. That's great. Now we need to make sure that our get user record is doing what it's supposed to do. So we have, we're saying getting user record. We're filtering by formula, where we're saying if the user ID is equal to the user ID that I just passed in, then we will have a record that comes back. Then I want to do a get. What is this part? HTTP get, where I'm passing in which table I want. I think that's just going to be this. Maybe I should do that as a thing, because I hate copying and pasting this all over the place. Yeah, let's do that. Back to my pretty face. We're going to come back here and create another environment variable. Sorry for not being able to share this. Edit, add. We'll call this what did I call it there? I called it Airtable base data. And that makes sense. Okay, so we'll come here and we'll call this Airtable base user. And that will be my environment variable for that. And we'll come back here. Okay, so what I've done is I've created another, this is going to be called base user. And so I've created another environment variable that's called Airtable base user. Base is like which database is it? That's the terminology that Airtable uses. So I'm basically just saying, look in this user table. No, no, it shouldn't be called user. It should be called data. Goodness, Jeff. You're getting sloppy. Because I'm not looking at the individual table. I'm looking at the database itself. So I'll explain what I'm changing here in just a moment once I get that off my screen. So here you can see that I have tables called user, user data type, and user data. But the grouping, the database itself is called data. And this is the thing that I'm actually pointing to. That's the thing that I need to care about. So in here, that is why this should be called base data. And this thing here now, this is basically the unique identifier for that database. I can put this here also. So now we're creating a new, so in here we have a formula where we're checking to see if the user ID is in the user table, and I believe the table is just called user, and it is. So we have, if nothing comes, if the length of that collection that comes back is 0, then we don't have anything. We create a new record for them where we return a new promise with all this Airtable stuff. The table's called user. We're creating a new user record. We're resolving that record, which will return all of this all the way back up as our results. And if there was a record, then we just return the found record that we found by grabbing that record out of there again, where record ID is what? I'm pulling user record. Oh, I see. This would allow me to pull the other data for the user, which is actually pretty useful. So I'll do it, but I don't really need it yet. So we'll just leave all that there. This might actually just work. That would be exciting. So let's take a look. We're going to do ask deploy force. We're going to push everything because I made some small changes to the interaction model before we started this stream. Minor things, but you saw one that we did right at the beginning as well. So I'm going to grab my chair, sit here for a minute. and we'll wait for that to run. While it's running, the expectation is that when we open the skill, then it should create a user ID for me. And return it back to my skill so that I could, I won't need to use it, but I will know the user's user ID. And the reason that I will need it eventually is because I then want to populate the dynamic entities for their data types, so that their specific data types are in the list. So we definitely will need that stuff, just not yet. Okay, looks like everything has finished successfully, so that's good. So let's go here, and I think I just called it data collector. Data collector. Do I use Airtable for persistence? Lord of Sound, I use Airtable for literally every bit of storage I have for a skill. There are many other ways that I could do it. I could save some of it to Dynamo or whatever. But Airtable seems to serve my purpose, and having all the data in one place makes my life easier. So let's give this a run. Alexa, open data collector.
Jeff, we encountered an error.
Cool. I like errors.
Jeff, we encountered an error. Jeff, we encountered an error.
Oh, because I'm calling my HTTP get function that I don't think I've actually brought in yet. That's another one of those things that would just... Alexa, stop. So I haven't actually brought in...
There was a problem communicating with the requested skill.
I know. So I need to bring in this HTTPS module. Which is right there. And then I need to add that to my... Goodness. I need to add... If I look at my other package.json... No, that's this one. I think that HTTP is just a 1.0. I don't think they went beyond that. One point zero. No semicolon. Save that. That all looks good. So in here I have HTTPS, and then the other thing that I need is the actual function, which again, is one of those things that I include everywhere. So we'll take this. Copy it. I don't think I have this in my Lambda function yet. So we come down here, and I did not include that yet. That's usually my last one. So that is there. I have the HTTP module. You can see this is where it pulls in like the name of the base, my Airtable key. It assembles basically the entire query for me. Oh, you're right. You guys, I'm sorry. So I just brought in my HTTP get function. Thank you, Ice Cream. So my HTTP get function, this is something that I've customized, but you could easily modify this to do whatever you need it to do to call any API. I just have these options kind of predefined to talk to Airtable because I use that pretty frequently. One of the other things that I'm going to do is get rid of this line, because otherwise it'll write all of my options, including my API key, to my logs, which, again, I don't want you all to see. It's not that I don't trust you, it's just that I don't trust you. So that all looks good. Let's try pushing just the lambda. /t lambda. Push that up and get where we're going. In the meantime, Ice Cream, I totally agree. The UI is fantastic for being able to let web and mobile non-developers, all sorts of people, be able to interact with it. I'm actually building a thing right now that potentially Airtable will be the back end for both the web interface as well as the Alexa skill. Hugo Catchpole asks, does Airtable have limits? Say if your skill got promoted by Amazon, would it be able to handle the requests? Yes, I think it would. You obviously want to be very careful about how frequently you're calling the skill, but I think it's something like 5 or 10 calls a second, which is decent. I mean, this isn't going to blow up. And you can work with them if you're going to scale greater than that. So you're not going to get burned if you just suddenly have all this success. It's 5 seconds, 5 per second per database. So that also has changed my architecture a little bit, and I tend to break things out into separate bases, which is a term you'll be familiar with if you use Airtable. But I tend to break that out a little bit so that I'm not calling the same one over and over and over. But there is obviously a convenience in having them in the same place because you can build relationships inside a base that you can't build outside a base. All right, so we're updated. Let's see if we can get this to work this time. Alexa, open data collector.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Cool. Still don't have my records, so let's go look at CloudWatch and see what we broke this time. Remember, we changed a lot of code, so there's a possibility that I've broken lots of things. Airtable error, unknown field name, user ID. Really? Oh, I capitalized the D. Well, that's easy to fix. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector.
Boom!
Let's get
There
started.
we go.
What is your current weight?
Stop.
Goodbye.
So you can see that I have my unique identifier in the table. Sorry. The unique identifier populated automatically. Right, this stuff updates on the fly. And I was also able to get the date that it was created. Yeah, Ice Cream, I'm with you. I also pull data back. I put it all in persistence as much as I possibly can, and try to limit the number of calls that I'm actually making. I'm trying to be responsible with my API calls, but there are times where you definitely need to do that. Saduki is here. My goodness. Everyone that's here, please welcome Saduki. This is her first visit to my channel. But she is an old friend of mine. She's very young, but she's an old friend of mine. And it's so nice to have you here this morning. Thank you for joining. So we have this user table where we've inserted our user record. And so we should also see in our logs, if we go back here, that this time we should have... the first time you can see we created a new user record. This is where we actually passed in the data to create that new user record. And then here, the second time we talked to it, when we said stop, it said returning found user record. And that means that it already found the user and didn't go and create a second user record, right? So we're able to grab that pretty easily. I can see in here what my user record is and what my record ID is and my date created. And this record ID is going to be the important thing for me, because as I'm trying to get the other user data that's in the other tables, this is the data that I will use to look that stuff up when I'm trying to do my dynamic entities. So, where should we go next? I think while we're in here, another thing that I'd like to do is I have a separate table for this, but we have an error table. And I'll just do this because it's easy and we're here. So we'll call this error, again, we're going to call this record ID just to be consistent, and we'll call a formula. This will be record ID, save. This will be date created. And they have that date created field for me, which is just crazy. Use the same time for all of them. Perfect. And then I have a couple of fields I want in here. I want the JSON request. That's going to be long text. And then I also want another field, which will be error stack. And that can be single line. That's fine. The single and double and long are really just the difference between whether or not it accepts line breaks. That seems to be the only real difference for me in those two data types. So now I have these three records that I can get rid of. Delete all selected records. Great. And then we're going to do the same thing in our error handler, just because we're here and we have the code that we need for it. So I'm going to do wherever my error handler is. It's right here. And we have this. I think I have an error handler in here that does what I need. Get user record, voice response. Here's my air handler, and I'm not logging them there. All right, I thought I was. Let's go to the Star Wars one. That one definitely is. So find the error handler. Go to the definition. And in here, these are the two lines. So these two on their own are enough to get me what I need to do. And so we'll just need to come into mine and tweak a little bit. So we have my error stack. I still want to log that stuff in the logs, but I also want to do this here. And this is where Airtable base error is a new thing that I haven't created yet. And the table that it's going to go into is called error. I called this JSON request, so we'll do that. And then I called this error stack. So that'll be my error stack, and then everything else is the same. So the only other thing that I need to do now is we got to go to camera view while I go here and get my error table. Let's go back a bit. I know you can't see this, so I'm going to my error table, my error base, and I have a table in there that we just created, and I want to create a record for that, and all I really want to see is show the API key, and I can't do that because I don't have any data in the table, so we'll just make one. Okay, and then we'll go back to my API. I know you can't see any of this. I show my API key, we grab that, we go to my Lambda function, we add a new environment variable that we're going to call Airtable base error, and that will be saved. So now we have, nope, I did the wrong data there. I want the base ID, not the API key. Yeah, I think Baby Yoda is the right one to blame. I think that's appropriate. Airtable base error. Let's take the right value and put it in there. Save. Okay, so now we're out of that. We can come back to this. Oh, no. I think I just did the thing I didn't want to do. And I did, but that's all right. Hopefully everyone will ignore that. All right, so I'm going to come back to my error table. And we can delete this record now. Maybe. And yeah, so we have our error table here. We have our code that has the two lines here to log our errors. That all looks good now. This will probably need an async on it. So let's push that up. And then as we continue moving through this, then we can see our errors in Airtable when something breaks. It's like the bottom of my code window. You can't see it. Let's do that. There we go. Did not push it because I didn't force it. All right. Let's force it. These revision IDs get changed every time you make a change to the Lambda. And because I've been updating those environment variables, I'm screwing up the revision ID because the version I have here locally now doesn't match. But you don't push environment variables with these pushes, so those will still be retained, and it'll just update the code, and now everything is in sync, in case you've ever run into that error. So let's try something, because now we have, we're now in a situation where we can open the skill. Welcome to Data Collector. What is your current weight? And then we have these values. So we could just do something like this, like just accidentally forget this variable, just to have it break when I try to tell it something. So let's try that. I'll just say 187 pounds or something, and it should break because it doesn't have speak output defined. So we'll push that one more time without the force, and then we can test the skill. back to this. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
187 pounds.
Jeff, we encountered an error.
Okay. So what we should see is in our error table. Look at that. It worked.
Jeff,
So we have
we encountered an error.
Alexa, stop. So what you can see here is that I have speak
Jeff,
output is not
We
defined.
encountered an error.
I must have tried to make...
Jeff, we encountered an error.
Oh my goodness. Alexa, stop.
Goodbye.
So you can see that it happened 4 times because it kept hearing me talk, and so that kept causing the error to happen. I also like to have a column in here called fixed. She did not want to stop. Sometimes I'm so busy talking to the camera that I forget that like she's listening to me also. And so this will be a checkbox. And so these are all related to the same thing. Speak output is not defined, so I'm going to go ahead and mark all of these. Nope, that's not what I wanted. As fixed. This is just a reference for me to know that I fixed this stuff. And then in here, I'm going to fix this thing. So we're now to a point where we could collect data, but we haven't populated that data type yet. So this is one of those other things where in my launch request, I'm going to want to populate my slots with the appropriate values. And the one that we're going to do is the data type one. Excuse me. So let's go look at my TKO trivia code, because that is where... That's not it. Those are all the website things. So let's go find it. And do I already have it open? Did I already open it? No, I have the Star Wars Databank one open. Open. And in here we'll find the TKO Trivia Alexa Lambda Custom Index.
Okay, here's fantasy football.
Alexa,
I'm sorry, but
stop.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Be sure to visit fantasyfootballnerd.com for more fantasy advice.
Okay, I will do that.
Because you used fantasy football.
Oh my goodness, Alexa,
Amazon
stop.
recommends another.
The thing that I need to do, let's see if I can find the word dynamic, because that's where this happens. Yeah, so I'm going to have an entity directive that looks like this. And that's going to happen in our code. So we're going to do that on our Lambda function. And then we're also going to have, where did it go? Here. You can see that we also then just add this directive that is that new thing. So all of this kind of happens, so I just need an add directive statement. Here, so in here I can just do add directive, where entity directive is this thing that I'm creating. And I probably need the period ahead of it. There we go. So this is the thing that makes that dynamic entities. And what I want to do is replace the values that are in my dynamic entity now, which if we look at that, or not my dynamic entity, but my in my data type slot, I just have weight in there right now. But what we really want to do is populate the data type collection with the things that the user has created. So in this case, we're going to replace and get rid of everything. The slot type is still going to be data type. And then in here, we need to create a collection of items that are each of the individual items from my database. So I think I'm going to make the calls down where I'm getting all my user data so that I just have it in my session. And so I can just use it here. I think that's probably the right way to go. So to do that, I have this thing here. This will break right now, which is fine. But we're going to have to come back and repopulate this with the values from my entities. So down here at the bottom we had our, excuse me with the yawning, we had my request log. This is where I got my user record. And so what I'm going to do next is say await get user data. We'll do it like this, and I'm still going to need the user ID. This is still, well, no, I have the new thing, which is user record dot fields. And if I look at, let's look at that in my logs so we can actually see it. But if I look at my most recent entry here, user record, I have fields.record ID where R and I are capitalized. That's the value that I really need. So we're going to take record ID just like that. And that's going to be a call to a new function that I'm about to create, which is get user data. So async function get user data. This is going to be record ID this time, and like so. We now have a function, and in this function, this is where we're going to call out, we're going to get the data types. I think that's probably all we need. I don't want to automatically call and get like all the user data, at least not yet, because that's a lot. Potentially, especially if they have multiple things they're tracking or whatever. I really only want to get the data that they need. These are things, as we were talking about earlier, if we end up having a lot of users, these are things that we could optimize. So I call once, which is painful because I'm calling every time the user opens the skill, but I'm putting it in session so that I don't have to recall and get that stuff over and over and over. So to get my user data, this is where I tend to use a function like this. So we're going to call this something like this here. And we're not going to call the user table, though. We're going to call the user data type table. And this will be user, we'll call this user data types just to be clear. And this filter here will be used by the filter property there. And this is where I want to say where what did I call it in the table? If we come back to my data table, I have user data type, and I called this field user. And get rid of those records. Those are just the sample ones it created for me. So do the same thing here. So I have one user record, which is me, so that's great. I need some user data types. So for this one, I'm just going to choose me, which is the only record I have right now. And my data type will be weight. And then we'll do another one. Same user. That is calories. And then we'll do another one that is mileage. I'm really leaning towards wanting to put a default unit on this. I don't know if that's right, but we have units here. I have quantity here. I don't even have units anywhere. I feel like there's going to be a place where I have to define units, but that's fine. We're not going to do that now. But so I have these three records, and I want to make sure that I'm pulling these records out of the database for my specific user, which happens to be me right now. So I want this user to be equal to record ID. And that's the record ID that I just pulled out of the database. So I should only be able to do this when the user's been created. So what's going to happen? How's this going to work? The first time this user uses the skill, they'll say, what's your weight? You'll say 187 pounds. I should probably at that point save weight as one of your things because you're then tracking your weight. And then you would have a record automatically. I don't know the right way to worry about that right now, so I'm not gonna. But I have this filter. I'm gonna pull some records back, and then all I'm gonna do is pull that data into a session variable. Yeah, I'm just going to pull it into a session variable. So this is just going to be return user data types. Because I don't know if they'll even have any data, so I can't dive into it any deeper. But in here, this is where this is not how I wanted this to work. So I need to pass the handler input in. So in this, I'm going to pass in the handler input also. This will give me access to the session and everything like that. So get user data, we're going to do handler input. This also means that what I should be doing here when I have this is what I'm doing in like this. Where I'm, let's see if I can find that. All right, so there's one more thing that I'm going to do in here when I have my user record. And that is I'm going to create a reference to the session attributes, which I don't need right there. I can do that at the top. And then in here, I'm going to say session attributes dot. I don't want all of it. The only thing I care about is their record ID. So let's just call this record ID equals user record dot fields dot record ID. But it's not going to be like that. It'll be like this. Nothing like just widely varying on my casing. And then I'm going to call get user data. So I have a record ID for my user because I either created one or I retrieved it from the database. I've stored that in my session. So I should use it from the session from now on just to be consistent. So it's the same value, but we'll do it there. And now I'm calling get user data. I'm passing in the handler input, and this is where in this function, I don't want to return that yet. I have their data types, and what I want to do is say, well, I need the session reference first, which is this one. But you can only grab that if you have handler input, so we'll do it at the beginning. And then in here, I can say session attributes dot, we'll call these data types equals user data types. I don't even need that. It'll just end. So that should save the values that I have for the user in their user data types. And just so that I can see this magic happen, we're also going to do a console user data types JSON.stringify, and this will be user data types. Okay, so now when we actually do this, we should be able to see in our logs the user data types that we've pulled out of the database. So let's push this up and see just how much code we broke. And hopefully this will just work. Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. I don't know if you're actually still sticking around or if you're just working with it in the background, but it's good to see you virtually. We should get together in person someday. All right, so that is done. Let's come over to our table here. And we should be able to see in our logs this all happen, assuming it doesn't break. Alexa, open data collector.
Jeff, We encountered an error.
Okay. Well, let's start by looking at our error then. Alexa, stop.
Goodbye.
Question is not defined on line 26. Okay. I don't remember working way. Oh, this is the thing that's broken. Right. So let's comment this out for now. And we'll take this line out too. Okay. I told you guys it was going to be broken. I don't know why you let me do that. Okay, it's saved. The Lambda function is updating. Cool. And it's just voice, so I'm not going to flip over to the Alexa view. We'll just stay here. Hopefully we don't get any errors. That has been fixed. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
187 pounds.
Jeff, you just gave me data.
Stop.
Goodbye.
Okay, so we didn't get any errors. That's a good sign. And if we go to our data table, we shouldn't see anything because we haven't done anything that would create new data. But if we go to our logs, we should see that we have those 3 records. So let's see, user data types. Look at that. We have mileage, we have weight, and we have calories, which are the 3 records from my database. You can see like calories ends in KHG. And if we go to my data, and we go to my user data type, and we look at calories, it's KHG. So we're actually pulling these exact records out of the database. Now we can go ahead and iterate through those and create our dynamic entity so that they have their data types available to do this. I think I want to take one more step. I think we have time to do this today. Before I iterate through that, before we make that part work, we have our data intent handler, but I also want that query one. Remember we have, if I scroll over here, we have the ability for the user to say something like, I want to track mileage, or I want to track weight, or I want to track my weight, or whatever, right? So that's the data type intent. And there's a slot called data type query. So I want to do that because I want us to be able to put records in that. So let's see if we can do, we'll just copy this. This one's going to be data type intent handler, data type intent. And then I don't really need any of this, but this is going to be data type query. And this is where I'm going to get that value. And then I need to insert it into the database. That's going to be the same way that we do a lot of these other things like the error message. So let's find that code. Where's my error handler? This is where we're just going to insert the record into the database. So if we do the data type intent handler, this is where we grab the thing they said, we store it in the database, but we also have to do another thing. So this is Airtable key, base error. I want this to be base data because I'm looking in that database. I want the table name to be user data type. Pretty sure that's what I called it. Always good to check. User data type is correct. And the records in that table look like I have a user ID and I have a data type. That's it. Okay. So the user ID is going to be in my session variable. So we can take this chunk out. Oh, too far. This is going to be, I don't have a reference to the session variables right now, so let me get that. It's always easier to copy it than it is to type it again. It's this guy. Copy. And go back to where I was. Data type intent handler. So This can be the first line. Then in here I can say session attributes dot record ID, because that's the thing. And then this will be data type, and this will be where the value I just got here, data type spoken, that's where that will go. So we'll take that like so, and that should allow me to insert the record into the database. So we'll test that here in just a second. And then I can say something simple like, okay, I've added the ability for you to track, and it's just going to be that data type spoken, data type spoken. Period space. You can now start tracking your data. What would you like to do now? Just so that I have a question, because that's a certification rule, is to end with a question. And this I'll just have, what would you like to track now? I'm being messy in this, and this is fine. I'll be taking all of this speech out at some point, but this is good to just have it all filled in. So what I've done right now, just by building this handler, is I let the user say whatever they want. I want to track Funko Pops or whatever. And all they'd be able to do is say, I have another one, or I bought 3, or whatever, because again, we're only using numbers. So maybe that's a bad example. But we could do weight or calories or meals. Maybe meals would be a fun one to try, because it's kind of a unique thing. How many meals did I have today? But we have the functionality to basically grab the thing that they said and use it. So let's see how that actually works. So if I take this data type intent handler, I need to add this to my registry at the bottom. And then we need to push my Lambda function up. So we'll deploy that really quickly, and then we'll go look at our table for data types. And what should happen is when I talk to the skill, it should insert another record here, and we'll use meals as my example. And for my speech, I want to say something like, I want to track meals. So we'll use that as my speech. Alexa, open data collector.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Okay. No, there wasn't. Alexa, open data collector.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Here's the thing, there wasn't a problem. Let's see what this says. Oh, it's breaking before I ever get there. That's because I have some async that isn't labeled. We're doing this in my new handler, which I probably did not designate as async right here. That failed before it could ever run, so I couldn't log my error. I put user ID. You are so right. What a great catch, QU311. The first time I've ever seen your name, and you're pair programming with me. Thank you so much for adding that. You just saved me an error. Let's deploy that. Fix it. That's a great catch, though. Thank you for noticing that. Because that was the next error I was going to encounter. Pair programming with a bunch of other people is the best. All right, so let's go back here. Let's look at our table, not the error table, but the actual data. User data type. Okay. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
I want to track my meals.
Okay, I've added the ability for you to track my meals. You can now start tracking your data. What would you like to do now?
Stop.
Goodbye.
What? Let's see. No errors, no data. That's the best. Invalid value for column. Value is not an array of record IDs. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So this, for whatever reason, needs to be this. Remember I was earlier talking about how I say that it can only allow one record ID, like it can only allow to talk one record. I can show you that, I guess, if you weren't here. If I go to my table and I go look at data and I look at my user type, my data type, there's this checkbox here that says allow linking to multiple records. And I very clearly have this turned off. This would suggest to me that I could pass in one value and it should work just fine. But regardless of whether you choose that or not, they expect you to pass an array every single time. It's just that I'm passing an array with only one value. So I think I just fixed that, which is by wrapping this in an array. That should now work. But that's why we got it. We got an Airtable error, which is this error out here. This is not my normal error messages because it happens asynchronously and doesn't affect the functionality of the skill. So I don't worry about those as much because once they're fixed, they're usually fixed. But let's try that one more time. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
I want to track my meals.
Okay, I've added the ability for you to track my meals. You can now start
No,
tracking
you
your
didn't.
data. What would you like to do now?
Stop.
Goodbye.
I'm pretty sure that it is, in fact, a valid value. So I have their existing records. That's another issue that we'll have to work with. But I'm making the call, invalid value for column, data type intent handler. Value is not an array of record IDs. What else could I do there? It certainly looks like an array. I've encountered this before. What did I do? Yeah, see, I'm doing that exact same thing here. I'm just wrapping it in a record ID. My guess is, so QU311, QU311. Let me know how you want to pronounce that. But we're going to go with QU311 for now. I think the trick that I have right now is that I'm not actually passing it a record ID. So we should look at our session attributes and see what we're actually storing in there. My guess is maybe I was messy in doing that. No, it's totally, you're totally fine to come from the C# world. That's appropriate syntax. It's just that is not exactly what they're looking for. Am I not recording my session attributes? I guess I'm not. Data type. I have my data types. Let's actually look at how I'm storing my record ID here. User record.fields.record ID. So let's do in get user data. Let's do a console login here just to see what value I'm actually getting. Record ID equals JSON.stringify, just in case I'm passing some kind of weirdness. Record ID. And then I'll also do have user record.fields right here. User record.fields .record ID. Unless that's not how it's capitalized, but I'm pretty sure it is. Record ID. Record ID. Okay. Well, we can figure this out. We now are logging the field, so I should be able to look at the user record that's in the logs. Info user record. And I have a record ID, and here's the value. Oh man, that's huge. I don't even need to do that. It's going to pull the user data type IDs out for me. That's actually not huge. I'm still going to have to make the call to get the additional data, but it's nice that I have at least the record IDs already stored there. So what am I doing wrong? I have a record ID. Let's push that new code up with the logging in there and see. Let's see what I'm doing wrong. It's possible that I'm just not passing it the appropriate value or something like that, but it seems like it should work. Okay, back to here. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
I want to track meals.
Jeff, this is the fallback intent.
Cool. I want to track meals.
Okay, I've added the ability for you to track meals.
What?
You can now start tracking your data. What would you like to do now?
Stop.
Goodbye.
You make me angry. I didn't change anything. All I did was add a logging statement. I didn't change any code. I did drop the word my that time, but I don't think that should matter. I was actually going to update my model a little bit to be a little more flexible on what I could say. I say I want to track meals or track my meals. So I could say I want to track my data type query. Yeah, that's the best feeling, isn't it, ice cream? Like, it's working now, so I guess that's right. No, Sarah, we're very early in the construction of this, and so I don't have nearly the kinds of sample data that the AI is relying on. And so if I were to build out my design more thoroughly, this probably would be less of an issue. Like, I shouldn't really have capital letters in here. I'm just being messy. So we'll do this. We'll do track data type query. Nope. Data type query. Close. Save. Hopefully that will help us a little bit. I'll probably have to push some more. I'll probably have to make some more changes in the future. But Sarah, I know you and I haven't had a lot of chances to talk really about how Alexa works, but the way this is structured is I basically define a bunch of what we call intents. These are the things that our skill can do. And then I define a bunch of utterances that kind of match what I think users might say. This list should probably be 15 or 20 things long because there's a bunch of different ways people might say this stuff. And so I haven't given enough training data to the AI to really infer what I'm trying to do or make the right decisions. So we're very early in the construction phase, enough to like test out and make sure that the things work, and then I can go back and refine this stuff and work with users and figure out what more of those utterances will be. But right now I'm just trying to get the core functionality built, so I've kind of skimped on my training data, I guess is the right way to say all that. Okay, it's almost done updating. And then I want to go look at my code. I guess we can do that now. And see what in the world could have changed. I didn't change anything. Well, let's try another one. I want to track water. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
I want to track my water intake.
Okay, I've added the ability for you to track water intake. You can now start tracking your data. What would you like to do now?
Stop. I think that's the place where I should ask them.
Goodbye.
I should ask them what the units are. That's where I should do that. I want to track water intake. Okay, cool. What units do we measure water intake in? Ounces. Okay, I'll make sure I measure water intake in ounces in the future. How many ounces did you have today? Yeah, I have plans for the units. I just didn't know if I needed to store that in my data, but I think I do. So let's create a new table. No, I don't even need another table for that. We can just have a field here. That is insert left, units. Okay. Because in a beautiful, perfect world, it would be so cool to just say, tell data collector I had 18 ounces today, and not give it any other context. And then if I needed to disambiguate, maybe they were measuring their food intake in ounces too, then I could say, oh, is this for water or for food? And then they could just hit me with food or water, and we're good. I'm not going to change things, Sarah. I don't think that I'm going to do something where like they would give it to me in ounces, and then I would say, oh, you've had 4 gallons this week. I would probably just say you've had 192 ounces this week or whatever. But yeah, Q311, that's exactly the plan eventually, is to be able to graph this data. That's why we're only collecting numeric data. And then we absolutely plan to have it generate graphs, display it on the Echo Show with APL, do a lot of that kind of stuff. That's much, much further down the road. Right now, I just want to get the data collection working, but that is definitely the plan. That would be like the final thing that we're going to move into, is the ability to see charting over periods of time. I don't even know where I'll start to do that, but well, I think the key, Ice Cream, for what if it's tracked in pounds or ounces? I think the key for this is it's up to the user. Whoa. This is just like a very tipsy stool that I sit on here, and I just almost fell over. It doesn't matter if it's tracked in pounds or ounces. It's what the user chooses, and so I think I have to lock them down and say, well, you said that you want to track this in ounces. I don't have anything that you measure in pounds. That's my guess in how that speech interaction would go. But now I have to do a units. Yeah, I have to do a units intent that's just like, hey, how do you measure mileage? Oh, in miles. Okay. I'm going to have to be able to store that as well, and store that as the units for the specific data type that they're working on, which means I'm going to have to keep track of what data type I asked them about. There's some work there. Okay. It's not hard work, it's just work. And then finally, for user data, because we have the data type and the units stored here, when I store my data, which will just be quantity, right? It'll be something like 9 things. I'll have that tied to their data type, which means I'll know what the units are. But I think I can do this. There's like a lookup. Yeah, there's a lookup type where I can say choose a field in another table. I'm going to choose data type. I'm going to choose units, save, And this is pretty cool. So when I choose a data type, like let's do the water intake, automatically it pulls ounces into this table, which means when I pull this record, automatically that'll be populated there. I don't have to do anything with it. So we should call this, come on, we should call this units, and then we should also have another one that is, what's the right way to do this? Call this data type ID, and then call this data type. And this will be a lookup also. And then Ice Cream, I see your question. Give me one moment. This will be data type. So it should look like that. That's cool because then I can pull these records back and all of that data comes back without me having, because you can't do things like I would do in like a relational database where I can have like left outer joins and stuff like that. So by doing these lookups, now when I pull these records back, I will have all the data that I need, and I won't have to make a secondary call to get that other stuff. Ice Cream, is the tracking unit a decimal? It is a decimal, so you can say 1.2 or something like that. If they're tracking the last date that they've done something, I kind of already do that for them. And we can be creative with that because all of my records have a date created record. So especially this one should. Why doesn't this one? So this should be date created. And then my data type for this will be that created date that we found down here. And this will be GMT for everything. And save. Yeah, I see where you're going with it. So I think the key would be they would be tracking the number of cigarettes they've had each day. And then the when did I have my last cigarette is really when is the last time I entered data. Right, and I can give you that pretty easily because I have your most recent date created date. But I don't think you need to actually tell me dates. I'm assuming that you're going to give me the appropriate data on the appropriate day, which probably isn't fair. There's going to be people that forget, and then they want to come back and enter data for yesterday. That's a bigger problem that we're not going to solve today. Excuse me. But we have, right now, I made a promise to the Lord of Sound that we would do this dynamic entities thing. And I think we're in a good position to do that now. We're not collecting any data from users yet, but we do have some data here. And we're almost to the point where we can start inserting data into this table too. So like this gets interesting because this user table doesn't actually have to be a join, right? I could do it this way. Customize field type. Instead of linking to a user, I could just do a lookup. And I want to look up the user from the other table. Yeah. So my record, I'm assuming my user record ID ends in KLL. And it does. Oh, that's great. I can drag that stuff straight through. So then I don't have to worry about like actually entering that data into all the tables. I can just say, oh, the data type for this record is this. That'll auto join all the other stuff that I need to know about the user automatically. This is pretty cool. I'm getting a little bit excited that this is working so well. Okay, so let's go back and we'll do our dynamic entities now because we have that data. And all we need to do now is create this thing here. And this thing here, that's going to force me to make this all work. So the thing that I need to do is get, I need to do like var entities equals get dynamic entities. And we're going to get, I need the session. we're going to get session dot, and it was data types, I think. What did we call that? Session attributes dot data types. So this is going to be attributes dot data types, and then I'm going to create a function here that basically creates this here for me, this chunk of items, this collection of objects. So we'll grab this, and instead here we can just say entities. Wonderful. Okay, so now we just need to create that new function, which I called get dynamic entities. Okay, let's bring that down here somewhere. Function get dynamic entities. This is going to pass in, we'll just call it data because I'm hoping I can reuse this for multiple things. And then this is the thing that I need to create. And I'm going to return an array, so I actually need to get rid of this too. So we're just going to do so what I'm returning is an array. All right, so back down to my function, wherever that went. This is what it's going to look like. And then if data doesn't equal undefined, which is possible, because what we get in our log here is user records dot fields. No, that's not it. Get user data. Let's go look at that one. We get back user data types. We should see what that actually looks like in our logs. So it's records. And I have the 4 things there. So I need let's do it this way. If data dot records dot length is greater than 0, then we're gonna do stuff. Else return an empty array. Is that really what I want to do? No, I should populate it with like boring stuff. I can't decide if I want to stand or sit. But in here, if it for I equals 0, I less than or I is less than data dot records dot length I plus plus. We are going to create some kind of variable here that is var entities I don't know if I can just do this, but we'll Can I initialize an array like this? That's that stuff that I never remember. Let's go do some searching. Initialize JavaScript array. That doesn't help me at all. I don't know why I ever go to W3 schools. Okay, do I do this in my code? If I go to the Star Wars one, or this one, find push. Yeah, so I'm doing the same thing here. I'm initializing an array, and then I'm just pushing things into it. Okay, perfect. So this is going to be entities.push. And this is where I'll create a new object. And the objects need to look like this. So let's see if we can get this down to one line. So it's nice and pretty. Probably won't have any synonyms for these. That's something we can always add later. So it's going to look like that. Okay. So we'll do that instead of this. And this part here, the ID, is going to be data.records I dot, let's go back and look at the structure of that in our log. This is Visual Studio Code, Lord of Sound. Yeah, that is what I'm using. Records dot ID. I can just use ID, but I'm also going to need data type, so I'm going to have to get into this fields node no matter what. So we'll do records.fields.recordID and records.fields.data type. So records.fields. I already forgot how it's capitalized. Record ID is capitalized. Record ID. Space. And the name. And then the value, this is going to be data.records I dot fields dot data type. And this is where this is the first point at which this is not a universal function, is when I ask for data type. So what I think I want to do is pass in data and then say the names should be data type. And if I do that, no, that's not what I want. I want this to be, we'll call this value name. And then this, instead of this, will be value name, like so. I'll always want the record ID. So that looks pretty good. Now I need to go back to where I call this. Go to implementations. Well, it's way up here at the top, so it's fine. Get dynamic entities, and this in here, I'll just say I want data type. And this way I can use that same function over and over to generate this kind of object stuff. But what we should see now is that when we call our launch request, we should end up creating an entity object, an array of objects, and then we're going to dump that in here, and then we're going to add the directive. So we should see that in our response. So let's give that a shot and see what we get. I didn't need to deploy everything. Shoot. Lord of Sound, what do you use to write your code? Visual Studio Code has been my go-to for almost 2 years now, I think. I'm interested to know what kind of IDEs you guys use. There's lots of options out there. You could do this all in Notepad, honestly, but I feel like this solves a lot of problems for me in JavaScript. But it seems to be a pretty solid text editor from what I've seen so far. QU311, if you're still here, I was also a C# person. So I actually worked at Microsoft for about 8 years, and I spent a lot of my time writing a lot of C#. And so getting back into JavaScript over the last 3 or 4 years has been awesome. But I still find myself sometimes saying, why? This is so easy in C#. Why can't I do this? Or vice versa. Man, this is so much easier. I wish I had this in C#. I find comparing and contrasting those in my head quite often. All right, let's see what we get here. Let's go look at. We're going to want to see our logs. That's the thing we care about. So I'll just leave it here for right now. Alexa, open data collector.
Sorry, something went wrong.
Ooh. Let's go look at our errors. That's always fun. No errors. What are we doing? So it didn't put anything in there, which is probably why it broke. But usually I would get an error message of some kind telling me that it broke. Word 1147, that was definitely this one. So why are my entities not getting in there? I guess we'll do a little more logging. So in here, let's do console.log entities json.stringify entities. See what we get from that. And just lambda this time. Everybody on the West Coast is getting to work. I'm seeing a ton of emails and instant messages coming through. Oh, I just dropped a bunch of frames too. That's weird. All right, Alexa, open data collector.
Sorry, something went wrong.
48. Let's see what my response was this time. Come on, hurry up. Let's go. Undefined. Okay. Well, the problem is in here then. So let's do some logging. Console.log. Oh. Console.log. Data. We'll start there. And then this all seems to be working, so I just figured it out. I never return it. Return entities. If you don't return your data from a function, it doesn't always work. So let's see if that. No, let's not do it inside the for loop either, Jeff. Let's do it there. Okay. Let's see if that gets me what I want. I went through all the effort to create that array of objects and then didn't return it. Okay, so back here. Alexa, open data collector.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Okay. You should be giving me an error here, I would think, for that. No? Okay. Let's see what our error is. If I look at the request envelope, the error was an exception occurred while dispatching the request to the skill. So let's see what we sent. We sent whatever this is. Looks gorgeous, except for the fact that there's a 5 in there. Why is there a 5 in there? Did I have a typo in my... Let's look at the logs, because I logged enough of this stuff that we should be able to figure it out. So, yeah. In my entities, the first record is a 5. I'm sorry, what? So where I'm doing this, if we go to Get Dynamic Entities, oh, because I'm doing this. Because I don't need to do this. I was actually giving it the first value. Dumb. Okay. It's weird though. It does feel like these should be logged errors. Maybe it's because the skill hadn't started yet. I don't know. Okay. Alexa, open data collector.
Welcome to Data Collector. Let's get started. What is your current weight?
I want to track viruses.
Okay, I've added the ability for you to track viruses. You can now start tracking your data. What would you like to do now?
Stop.
Goodbye.
Okay, so in here, my response builder should look like this. This is where I'm updating my dynamic entities. And I have my different data types: mileage, weight, water intake, calories, and meals. Now this happened before I said anything about the data types, but if we look at the next one, we won't have updated it. So we need to update the user data types record that we have also. Because I need to be able to make sure that I'm dynamically updating their slot every time they add one of these. So, how would you do that? I'm doing it here. And then they give me in here the new record. And so when I come back, it's right here that I need to do it again. So we need to take this I also hate when my braces are off. Okay. How do I want to do this? I need to basically extract this. And be able to do this in multiple places. So I mean I could extract this into yet another function where it'll be get entity directive. What if it'll let me do this? This would be amazing if this works. So I have this get entity directive. I'm just going to call the function right there. And I'm not going to... do anything else in there. And then down here where I'm getting my entities, we're going to create a new one called function get entity directive. I'm going to have to pass those same things in, right? Data, value name, and I'll have to pass them through. But in here I could have, we'll leave that logging there for now. Who knows what I'm about to break. This goes like this, and then I'm going to return entity directive. I don't know if I'm painting myself into a corner here, but it'll work for now until I have additional data types that I want to do. Get dynamic entities does the thing it's supposed to do, but I need to pass data and the value name here. Which means up here at the top, I need this to be whatever that just was. Session attributes.data types and data type. So this becomes data, comma, and this becomes value name. This becomes data type. This would be magical if that just works. But what this allows me to do then is take this statement and add it to my data type intent handler also, like that. And then the last thing that I'll need to do, because when they give me a new data type, I need to add it, will be session attributes dot what do we call it? I guess I called it up here. Session attributes dot data types. Data types dot push. This isn't going to work because I don't have the record ID. What I'm trying to do here, if it isn't obvious, is that they say, hey, I want to track this brand new thing. It's a thing they probably want to track right now, right? So they say, hey, I want to track this thing. And I say, cool, you've added the ability to track that thing. What do you want to do? And then they're going to say, like, track my weight or whatever. Or won't it matter? I'm going to do this instead. This is one of my, like, we'll solve the problem later, to do. Need to get the new record ID for the new data type so that we can add it to the session array of data types. Oh my gosh, It's noon. Oh, and there's my alarm. Oh my gosh, I lost complete track of time there. We have saved. We're going to deploy our code one more time. But we are out of time for today. I've got 1,000 other things I've got to do today, so I'm going to have to skip here really quickly. But thank you guys all. This was great. We made a lot of progress today. We've got some dynamic entities. Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. We've got dynamic entities working, kind of, but we've got a lot more work to do. So I will be back here on Wednesday, and we'll keep rolling. Thank you guys all for tuning in, and I will see you again very soon. I have office hours tomorrow on the Amazon Alexa channel. There's also 2 new shows that'll be starting this week, I guess I should mention. The first one is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Amit Jatwani and I will be, we have 6 skills that we've picked out from a specific category, and we're going to use them and review them and offer feedback on what works and what doesn't work and things they could do to improve their skill. And then on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., I am going to be interviewing one of our Alexa champions, and so these will all be on the Amazon Alexa channel on Twitch. But I'll be interviewing him and talking about some of the cool stuff he's working on, and his inspiration and what he uses in tools and all that kind of stuff. So that will all be on Wednesday. So hopefully we'll see you all soon. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.